Welcome everybody to another episode of Waiting Wisdom. Today I'm with Peter McLeod here at the test in England.
So I'm based here.
Yeah.
I'm based in Hampshire. The office is no more than 15, 20 minutes away from the test. We're basically situated in between the test and the Avon valleys.
Yeah.
And about 8 years ago, we were thinking, well, we're selling all these international trips. What on earth are we doing when we're not actually looking after our domestic product?
Yeah.
So we started a domestic program, and it grew and grew and grew. Mostly pushed by Alex Jardine, who's my colleague.
Yeah.
I mean, he is a river fisherman through and through.
Yeah.
I don't think he ever had toys as a child. I think it was mostly bits of fishing tackle.
Yeah.
Like that. But I mean, I've Chalkstream fished for pretty much my whole life. It's one of the sort of starting places that I kicked off with my father a long, long time ago. So being on a river, understanding how a river operates, especially these chalk streams, which are very unique. I mean, they are very different to a lot of rivers that you'll find further north or in Europe or even in America.
Mm-hmm.
And the entomology behind being on a chalk stream is vast.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much history and tradition encompassing this area. I mean, you can read some of the old books from 1900 and they're talking about the same beats that we're now sitting on.
Yeah.
So being based down here and guiding down here is a privilege. And it's also a wonderful way for us to get to meet people who are getting into fly fishing. We can put them on the path, and then 5-6 years down the line, then maybe they might want to do an international trip. So we have a good guide team down here. We look after a lot of different beats up and down the river systems, and we can pretty much organize everything from groups with sort of white linen cloth table service to single rods who are just looking for a bit of fishing at the weekend. But I do end up spending a lot of time down here on the chalk streams as a result. COVID was mental because we had no international at all. So we were all on the river guiding all the time. And I think we were putting in about 50 days a season. So we were seeing the entire hatch from start to finish of all the different insect types. So in terms of chalk stream fishing, I think the easiest way is to begin maybe up at the top of the river system.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've had a chance to get up into the upper part of
what's there?
So that's skinny.
Uh-huh.
Tiny little riffles and wild fish and little sort of chalk pockets with ranunculus weed around and little fish sitting in the pockets just waiting for those fish. So when I'm way up the top there, I love this. This is an 8-foot 3-weight.
Uh-huh.
And you can get over the fringe with this. It gets into the tight pockets up underneath.
Yeah.
And it is the most beautiful little rod, and it's a pleasure to fish with.
I have this one as an 8-weight.
Oh, do you?
And I love it too.
As an 8-foot 3-weight, it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. It's very precise. There's very little rebound on the rod tip, and it'll put a fly exactly where you want it. So that's my favorite for up there. And I match that. When I hit the chalk streams, I come off technical.
Yeah.
And I go traditional.
Uh-huh.
So I like to fish with a lot of the old pattern reels. I actually have some of the older vintage Hardy reels and the old Marquises and stuff like that. And some of the perfects.
Yeah.
And it's just the noise. It's like a symphony.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
You don't need a big drag system. It's more than capable of dealing whatever this river system is going to produce. So I've got a very small little Marquis that goes on this one, which is really good fun. And then
in terms of line, what would you use with?
I am using Rio Technical Trouts.
Uh-huh.
There's one on this one. I mean, that's one of my favorite go-to lines. Again, like the GT line, I like a line with a slightly longer belly.
Yeah.
Because then I just find I have a bit more control over what's happening. I can aerialize just a little bit more line and then put it down gently exactly where I want it.
Yeah, I agree.
So for me, the technical trout is that perfect blend of being able to aerialize line, but also the finesse and the delicacy of actually just touching a line down gently on the water. And sometimes, you're fishing size 18s and stuff like that, and you don't want a big, flat, sort of heavy fly line. It's just going to come whacking down. So yeah, that's what I use. That's what I use in the top half of the river. Then my main weapon of choice, I think this one is it, which is a 9-foot 4-weight.
Mm-hmm.
And this is again a marksman. No, this is an ultralight. I brought the wrong one.
Yeah.
I've actually picked up the wrong one. It's the problem with all of these cases.
Yeah.
They're exactly the same. It's this one.
And all the rod socks as well.
Yeah, I know.
Can
I
hardly
write on
tell the
most of them.
difference.
My Chalkstream ones I had
Yeah.
forgotten to. So that's the 9-foot 4-weight
Got it.
marksman.
Yeah.
Very similar to this in the way it casts. It's got a bit more grunt and a bit more power. And when we get into the likes of mayfly fishing, and you are fishing with, it's a big fly,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to be able to put that down.
Yeah.
And be able to push that into a wind.
Yeah.
So the 9-foot 4-weight for me is a brilliant all-round rod. I use it for the majority of my bigger dry fly fishing.
And then when it comes to leaders, for example, what's your go-to there?
Again, I mean, you don't have to overcomplicate this. I just generally use the Fulling Mill 12-foot leaders, and I probably mostly stick with 6X.
Okay.
When we are into mayfly, I'll probably go to 5X because then they don't twist.
Yeah.
When you fish with those bigger patterns, especially some of the ones which have got more hackles involved, it will spin.
Yeah.
And if you end up using the dreaded daddy long legs, you have the same issue.
Yep.
So the bigger flies, I like the heavier the leader. Most of my fishing I'll do with the 6X.
Yeah.
But then sometimes when it gets a bit finicky, I'll probably go down to a 7X point.
I was surprised because I was at Rough Gents 2 days ago, and they even recommended to go all the way down to like 3 and 4X.
Yep.
And I was surprised. I would have guessed that's too strong to present a dry, but it worked well. So
the old leader profile leaders, they love them.
Yeah.
I've got a couple in here, but they work. There's at the end of the day on a Chalkstream, you're only putting about 1.5 foot of leader over the top of the fish.
Yeah.
Everything else is behind it.
Yes,
So if
right.
you got the cast right.
Yeah, and the fly comes first.
And the fly comes first, then it's not an issue.
Yeah.
And as sight fishing, it is considerably easier than if you're nymphing on a sort of, a mid-country stream or something like that. So we do have the advantage of being able to see what we're fishing for. So yeah, I mean, the tapered leaders are fine, and then I just put tippet material on the end if I feel I need to lengthen it out.
Yeah. And do you use like a little tippet ring with it, or
no,
do you use a knot?
Or I just use a surgeon's knot, which is quick, and
if
I'm guiding, and I can just quickly whack it on.
Yeah.
As I said, the issue comes if I've been on a saltwater trip in March, and I get back on a Chalkstream, and I'm going, I can't even see there. Yeah. This is just.
When it gets to like 6X,
it takes 7X. It just takes a little while to get.
Especially when the light.
It takes a little while.
Low.
I have to admit, I now have one of those old man's drop down magnifiers on my baseball cap because I can't see.
Yeah.
Which can be a little embarrassing if you're guiding a client. It's like, oh, who knows? There's a fish over there.
Yeah, but it helps at night. I agree. I think because otherwise I get so annoyed that I can't tie the knot, and I'm like, I'd rather go with that.
This is one of these fantastic inventions, which is definitely meant for older people.
Oh, wow.
Have you seen one of these?
No, never.
So this box has got a bunch of needle threaders on it.
Yeah.
So you thread all the flies on, and then you just put the leader through that, and then you just pull the fly off, and it just pops it straight onto the leader.
Wow. No, I've never seen that.
When it's getting quite dark, even if you can see properly, that is a really useful tool.
Yeah.
So I have all my little kind of CDC olive patterns on those, and my tiny 18s and stuff like that. So the little sherry spinners and those patterns, I find that's an invaluable piece of kit.
Do you ever go smaller than 18?
I will go down to about a 20, but anything more than that, I just can't see it.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see where I'm putting it, but I can't see to tie the thing anymore. So I potentially would. There are situations where going really small on Chalkstream can be very helpful, but I think age is getting me. So.
Yeah. No, but I found that interesting. I was fishing the Itchen 2 days ago, and like during the day or the early afternoon, I felt like even the big fish were zipping something small.
They go to the olives,
right? And
even in mayfly.
Yeah, you could definitely tell they were not interested in the big ones until sort of the light came down in the evening. And
take one of these.
Yeah, nice.
It's a little JT olive, a little CDC, and when the olives kick off, that's the fly. That's the one you want.
Cool. So we have really small ones. We saw those big ones.
Really big ones. So this is what I call my war rig.
Yeah.
So when I'm guiding, I use this fish pond pack.
Yeah.
On the sliding rails. I really like this because I can flip the water bottle and the pack out of the way.
Yeah.
It's got a drop down slot for my net.
Yep.
There's
a long handle because of the higher bank.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, because we're not allowed to wade here.
Yeah.
And this prevents me being stung to pieces by stinging nettles. But I really like these fish pond nets because the mesh is really nice to the fish. And you can release fish really well in one of these. You can actually just literally hold them in the current, they recover, and then they just swim out of the bag. And it's a really good tool. So I've had one of those literally since they came out.
Yeah.
So that's a great piece of kit. That just sits down the back, out of the way. I've got my fob here with all my dead patterns on it, which have
Okay.
been moved over or used.
Yeah.
Nippers. I always carry a water bottle
Mm.
because actually you get quite dehydrated when you're fishing out here. You've
Yep.
got to remember to drink.
Yeah. You get all
Because you get
excited.
really excited, and beer is not particularly good rehydrator. On the end here, I have my chamois leather or amadou.
Yeah.
So that's if I've got a saturated fly.
Yeah.
I give it a bit of a workover. So the first thing is to take out most of the moisture with that.
Yeah.
Then I will go to the Szymanski shake and dry powder.
Yeah.
Which takes the rest of the moisture out. And then I go to Frog's Fanny.
Yeah.
Or one of the other the dehydrated powders.
Yeah.
So either Hunt's Original,
Yeah.
Frog's Fanny, one of those.
Uh-huh.
Those are fantastic for CDC flies.
Mm-hmm.
So I carry all of that kind of stuff in here along with, I've still got gink.
Yeah.
Still swear by gink. Gink is really good on the big flies. I do carry lip balm in here. What else? I've got sort of this also. So this is the Orvis mud or the Fuller's Earth. On the chalk streams, it's really important to degrease the first 4 or 5
Of the leader.
sections
Yeah.
of your leader, because that flash as it comes down can often be the difference between success and failure. So always degrease the leader.
Mm-hmm.
What else we got in this little pack of mine? I've got some mucilin just in case I need to do the opposite and actually bring the leader up.
Yep.
In terms of leader material, a lot of people ask this question when they're coming down to fish on the chalk streams. Should I buy fluorocarbon?
Yeah.
It's obviously going to be better because it's fluorocarbon. And the problem with fluorocarbon is it sinks.
Yep, exactly.
So if you put the fly out and the leader sinks underneath, as soon as you pull that fly out to recast, it saturates the fly. So generally speaking, we stick with nylons and copolymers.
Yeah.
I'm a copolymer guy, and then I will use fluorocarbon for nymphing.
I agree. I always use monofilament for dry fly fishing, and then
it's
just
much
fluorocarbon
better, and it just comes off the surface film that much easier.
Yeah.
So I carry my main 2 sources of tippets on the front, which I go through large quantities of every season.
Yeah.
So I normally carry 6X and 5X in the front. I always carry a monomaster.
Yep.
Which sadly I lost in the field the other day, so I've got to go and find that. But when you got to get rid of spent leader, the monomaster is a fantastic piece of kit. You can just reel it up, and if you're on your 5th leader in the space of 45 minutes, because most of it's got in the tree. I'm talking about some other people, I might add, rather than myself. Then that is a great way to get it out of the way and just stops it being in the wrong place.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes you put it in the pocket, then you pull out something else.
And it falls out, and then you find it on the riverbank, and nothing makes me angrier
Yeah.
than finding bits of old leader material on the river.
Yeah.
Especially in a pristine...
No, it shouldn't be there.
It shouldn't
I
be.
agree.
So then we have forceps.
Yep.
Obviously vital.
Yep.
Can't go anywhere without forceps. There's nothing that makes you look more amateurish than delving around in a fish's mouth when you're wagering for a photograph.
Yeah.
So that's the best way to deal with that. And then I carry basically a number of different boxes in varying degrees of sizes. So these are my traditional dry flies.
Yep.
So these are the old Greenwell's Glories and the pheasant tails and the tups, indispensable. And what else we got in here? The sparkle caddises and those little CDC flies. So that is that one. You've got to be really careful with these boxes though, because if you open it in a big way, all your flies all over the place.
Yeah.
So I always sort of, kind of do this, make sure that doesn't happen.
A little treasure.
Then, as we touched on briefly, this is my threader box where I keep all my kind of regular little flies, which I need to get at quickly and get on the leader quickly. Then we move to the bigger dry flies, which I move to the bigger tacky box. And that's a kind of a standard selection of where we're about in this year. And this will change as the season progresses. So we've moved off the hawthorns and the sedge patterns, the granum. And now we're moving into mayfly patterns, mayfly emergers. This is a phenomenal fish finding fly. That's good. It's called a rat-faced McDougal. Deer hair body.
Yeah.
Quite difficult to sink.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I got a visitor there. Some other traditional, the French partridge.
Yep.
Which is very, very good for the end of the mayfly, the spent thing. Although the fly I've shown you here,
this one here,
which is called a Bucky's love child.
Yeah. I love all those names.
Which is a combination of a French partridge and a grey wolf. Now, this fly is an absolute killer.
It is. I fished this one 2 days ago and caught a lot of fish on them.
We've been killing fish on these for about 3 seasons. And it's invented by a lovely chap called Pete Bucky, who does a lot of guiding for us.
Yeah. What do you think makes it so successful?
Difficult to say.
Yeah.
I think it's more the fact that this is a fly that you can fish in all 3 different phases of the mayfly hatch.
Yeah, okay.
So you can fish it slightly saturated as an emerger.
Yeah.
You can gink it up and fish it as a spinner. And then you can also fish it as a spent at the end of the day by just making it look a bit waterlogged and flat. And it's just a really good colour for here.
Yeah.
And it just kills.
Yeah.
The big CDC sedge flies, which are great last knockings in the evening.
Nice.
Skitter it across the surface.
Yeah.
Quite often the fish are absolutely clued.
They imitate like a caddis.
It's a caddis.
Yeah.
We're British. We call it sedge.
Sedge.
Yeah.
Got it.
But yeah, it's a caddis.
Yeah.
It's a caddis. Other great fish finding patterns are things like the retirers, which is a variation of an elk-haired caddis.
Yep.
A typical elk-haired caddis is some upwings, some emergers, little foam beetles. We have a certain period of time here where the beetles drop off the trees.
Is that later in the summer? Or?
Yeah, it can happen later in the summer, and those are deadly because the fish don't see many of those. And you just literally almost cast it into the bush, and then it plopped down underneath that big fish which is sat in the corner.
Yeah.
And they'll quite often, they almost turn around and come downstream after these. So you've got to be quite careful how you set the hook.
Yeah.
The ubiquitous daddy longlegs. If all else fails, daddy longlegs is work here.
And you give them a little twitch.
You can twitch them. You can fish them static. It's just a big meal.
Yeah.
To make a fish come off the bottom.
Yeah.
Because if they're not rising or they're feeding on nymphs, and we're
these guys
covered in mayfly, those two are stuck together.
Yeah.
£5 on that one. And then when we hit the beginning of July, then we are finally allowed to nymph.
Yeah.
Because obviously most of this fishing is only upstream.
Yeah.
Upstream dry fly, which I know seems quite antiquated, but actually on a lot of the beats on the river systems here, it's crystal clear. And if you nymph and you know what you're doing, then you can hammer the fish. And we don't really want that.
Yeah. No, I like the tradition in it, you know.
So we don't want to make it too easy.
Yeah.
And when we move to nymphs, then I start moving into these kind of things.
Yeah.
A lot of pheasant tails. These are some of my grayling patterns as well for later in the season. And then these are the ones I normally use for most of the chalk streams, which are basically just tungsten beaded pheasant tails, tungsten beaded hare's ears.
Yeah.
Small, size 6 ears. And sometimes even smaller when you're fishing very skinny water. And you can fish that almost like a dry fly in a traditional way. And that's how I like to nymph.
Yeah. And do you fish only one nymph or like
I only fish one.
Yeah.
Most places only allow one. You're not allowed to use a team. When we move into grayling season in the autumn time, then we can start Euro nymphing and that kind of thing. So then you might fish 2 or 3 as a team. But other than that, it's a fairly standard selection. It's nothing over exciting.
Yeah.
Some of the dry flies are quite traditional.
Yeah.
With a traditional fish.
Yeah.
In a traditional place.
Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah. So that kind of finishes off most of my Chalkstream kit.
Yeah.
Apart from reels, actually. We didn't talk about reels.
Exactly. Got one right here.
This is a 1921 Hardy Perfect.
Yeah.
And just...
those waist sight,
it's a little heavier, perhaps, than maybe I'd want to fish with normally, but it's a pretty thing.
Yeah.
It's a pretty thing. So I've got 2 or 3 of those, which I love to use.
Yeah.
Marquises, Duchesses, and some other...
All without
breaks,
Yep.
all just with spring and pull drags. It's a much more tactile fishing experience. And when you hear it sing, sends shivers down my...
No, I agree. I like it. I think in trout fishing, like you're saying, if it's not like a big river with like huge trout, I think click and pole is always gonna work.
Yeah, totally. There's no need for anything else.
Yeah.
The last thing is my Yeti Go box.
Yep.
Which is basically I throw everything in that. That's my guiding kit. War rig goes in there. all the boxes, all the flies. I've got spare reels. I've got spares of spares of spares. So if we're doing a full guided day, we've got 6 guides out or whatever, then we can distribute flies. And I also pack it away quite religiously so that invariably I'm totally disorganized when I'm getting ready to go out. So I know that I can just grab the whole box, chuck it in the car.
I'm the same nowadays with a rod case.
Yeah.
I just, a couple of years ago, I decided to go for one because, like you're saying, you can just be sure when you get to the water, you haven't forgotten anything.
Exactly.
Otherwise, I had,
Nothing worse than getting down to the river.
Yeah.
I've left my rod.
And it happened to me, right? I once came down the river, I had my rod, but I had no reel. And I was like, there's nothing you can do. Other way around, still, Yeah, exactly.
It's about all that's left.
Yeah.
The one last thing I'll cover, which I've forgotten about, is when we hit nymphing.
Yeah.
So we're back on the nymphing. When we go to nymphing, I go to a longer rod.
Slightly longer, yeah.
Yeah, so this is a 9'9" 3-weight, Hardy ultralight. And that is a beautiful, beautiful weapon for this. I used to use the 9'9" 4-weight for this kind of thing, actually, just because in the lowest sections of the river, you can get right over the top of the fringe. And we do have quite an extended fringe. The keepers keep a fringe here so that you can sneaky beat up to a fish. And just the extra length, sometimes you can get really close opposite the fish, rather than having to put a long cast in.
Yeah.
That's a great rod as well.
And you can even urine nymph with it.
And you
right?
can urine, and I urine nymph with this as well for grayling in the Eaststone. So that kind of completes my Chalkstream rig, I think.
Great. Thanks a lot, Peter. That was very insightful. We talked about a lot of things, and I think now it's time to
I think
try to catch the hatch.
Yeah. Look, the spinners are heading to the water, so
beautiful.
we must follow them.
Great. Thanks, Peter.
Not at all. Good to see you. Thanks a lot.